the very strong narrative from my most recent trip, although we called this out on earlier trips, was the malnutrition we saw. So the starvation, these patients coming in with these terrible injuries, but also profoundly malnourished, and their inability to heal from injuries from the surgery. So the mortality rate from these injuries was far, far higher than they should have been.
I'm confused because we had a guy, an American called Johnny Moore, who's some sort of self-described Christian minister who ran the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And we were assured directly by him that there's no starvation in Gaza because they were bringing in more than enough food aid. That's not true?
Most certainly not true. Whether that's a deliberate lie or misinformation, I can categorically say there is no truth in that statement whatsoever. I spoke out about this publicly back in January 2024 when that was 3 months into we were beginning to see the signs of malnutrition. I was there again 6 months later. It was much, much worse. I was there again the following year. And the malnutrition, I mean, I can reel off names of children who I operated on who died because they were malnourished. I mean, they're imprinted on my mind. Little Habiba, a beautiful 11-year-old girl who came in, she wasn't malnourished, she came in, but she had a severe explosive injury. Her lower esophagus was shattered. Oh. That's what I do in Oxford. I operate on the esophagus day in, day out. I spend the whole of one night reconstructing her esophagus successfully. But because her esophagus was so damaged, she couldn't eat or drink. She was on a ventilator. We had to tube feed her. We had no nutrition to give her. She died after 4 weeks. Her repairs intact. She died because she had no nutrition.
Because the hospital had nothing to give her?
We had no nutrition to give her. We had no nutrition to give any patients at all, Tucker. No nutrition.
Where was the rest of the world?
Well, I mean, this is something we've called out repeatedly, very publicly. It's something I've told my government about, that there is a total blockade. At that time, a total blockade which lasted about 5 or 6 months of any aid going into Gaza. From March the 18th, 2025, when the Israeli broke that ceasefire, I was there in June and July. There was a complete blockade, no food going in. I saw friends of mine, surgeons I'd been known for years. One guy, I didn't recognize him because he lost 40 kilograms in weight. I lost 8 kilograms in a month there because we had very little food to eat. So the malnutrition, the starvation was appalling. And those commentators who claim there was enough food going in are being profoundly dishonest in saying that.
But, I mean, what was the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation doing then?
Well,
they were going on television bragging about how Johnny Moore was telling everybody that they were saving the people of Gaza.
Well, they weren't at all. I mean, so prior to that, UNRWA was distributing food. They were, of course, were stopped by the Israelis. They were distributing food through over 400 food distribution points. And within the limitations of what food was getting into Gaza, they were distributing it as well as they could. They were stopped completely. They were replaced by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which had 4 food distribution points. Now, I didn't go to them because I wasn't able to, because I was in the hospitals. It was too dangerous to leave the hospitals. You know, I was in Nasser Hospital, where at one point the Israeli military were 200 meters away. We couldn't go out at all. The only safe place the least dangerous place was to stay in the hospital. So, but what I did see were the victims who had been shot at those Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food distribution sites.
You personally saw them?
I operate on many of them. And I also had Gazan colleagues, Gazan healthcare workers who used to go out to the food distribution points, the GHF sites, to get food. And they were all describing these food distribution sites as death traps. And the first inkling I had that that something horrible was going on there was, I think, on something like my 4th day there, my last trip. I was called to the operating theatre by one of my Gazan surgical colleagues who he had a 12-year-old boy on the operating table, and he'd been shot. It had gone through his aorta. He was dying. He was bleeding. They couldn't stop the bleeding. So they asked for my help. I went in there. I couldn't stop it either, by which time his clotting had all gone wrong. This happens in severe injuries. So he was bleeding out from everywhere, and he died on the operating table under our hands. Awful. I mean,
12 years old.
12-year-old. And his family told us, who'd come with him, that he had been sent by... These were all starving. They're all very weak. So the young teenage boys are the ones who are sent out because they're the strongest to get the food. And he'd been shot by an Israeli soldier there.
Why?
And they'd witnessed this. Well, I can't speculate any better than anyone else as to why this is happening. What I can do is I can document what I saw, and I can document what I heard from... And it was a similar story from all the victims' families, from those that survived, from the victims themselves, from Gazan healthcare workers who went to these food sites in order to get food for their families. They all described the same things, how these young teenage boys were being shot by Israeli soldiers. So that 12-year-old was shot. And then I started hearing from many others. And a friend of mine who worked in the emergency room at Nassau Hospital, one of the people I was telling you about earlier, who had the previous year been incarcerated in an Israeli prison for 60 days and been tortured daily. He'd recovered. He was now working again. He told me how they had noticed in the ER how there were different body parts being targeted on different days at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food distribution point. So one day, he said, and other emergency room doctors and nurses I knew corroborated this, that 19 young teenage boys had all come in one day, all of whom had been shot in the head and neck. Nowhere else, just the head and neck. Another day, they came in predominantly with chest injuries. Another day, they came in predominantly with abdominal gunshot wounds. And we noticed this. I started speaking to my fellow surgeons in the operating theatres, and we all noticed this pattern as well. On one day, the Saturday before I left Nassau Hospital to come home to England, 4 young teenage boys were brought in, all of whom had been shot in the testicles. Just the testicles. Now. Nowhere else. And the pattern of injuries that we all witnessed was so striking that it was clearly beyond coincidental. And it seemed to us like there was a game of target practice.
And these were all children who'd been shot, Palestinians who'd been shot at Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food distribution sites.
Absolutely. And I operate on a lot of them. I operate on a lot of them with abdominal injuries.
Okay, so if let's say you're in the business of not the business, you have the ministry to distribute food to the starving, not to Hamas militants, but just to families, children, women, the elderly. And people start getting shot at your distribution sites. Don't you do something about that? How could the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation day after day allow starving people to be shot at their distribution sites?
Your guess is as good as mine, Tucker.
But just try to put yourself in their position. Wouldn't you say, whoa, wait a second, we can't have this? Wouldn't you say that?
Yes, I would. So the description I got from many of my colleagues who went to them was that the food would all be laid out in a compound, and the gate would be locked, and there'd be enough food. And again, I got this description from many of my friends and colleagues who used to. These are people who'd been working intense shifts in the hospital for 24 hours. Then, before they went home, they had to go and get food for their families starving. So there'd be this food in a compound, and there'd be enough food for, say, 200 people in this compound. There'd be a narrow gate locked with everyone crowding outside. They would wait until there were 400, 500, 600 people queuing up outside, i.e. far more people than there was food allocated for. And then they'd open this narrow a gate to get in, and there'd be utter chaos and fighting to try and get that food. And that was when they were being picked out, apparently with
shot in the pen.
They were being shot trying to get in, and shot in the pen by surrounding soldiers.
Unarmed people.
Unarmed people. Again, I stress this is what's been described to me.
Well, and
on
not just
occasions.
by you. I mean, we interviewed
There's actually videos that you can see this on YouTube where it looks like literally the Hunger Games where they're running to get the food. It is so gross. You see American soldiers out there. You see soldiers from Israel. It is so nasty and disgusting what they're doing for them to get for them to get food. It is, and they're just picking them off, shooting them. I almost had a hard time believing it when I seen it. It almost doesn't even seem real.
Tony Aguilar was one of the American contractors hired to provide security for these sites, who described the same thing. And he watched his life overturned as he was slandered by Netanyahu's many defenders in our media, paid liars, by Johnny Moore, who ran it, who's now affiliated with Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. And I do hope that the people who run Liberty will sit Mr. Moore down and ask him to respond to what you've just said, because you're describing a war crime, one of the most immoral, disgusting scenes I can imagine, which he oversaw. And so you hate to think that someone like that could be rewarded by Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, after participating in that. So I just want this on the record. Not that it, I guess, probably matters. No one will pay any attention because no one has so far, but that's really upsetting. So the children, the boys shot in the genitals, I hesitate even to ask, but is that something that can be fixed?
Yeah, I mean, they weren't my patients because I'm not a urologist, but I remember when they came in, because I was in the operating theatre complex at NAS operating on people with gunshot wounds to the abdomen, and my close friends who are urologists had this succession of boys being brought in who they were operating on. So I wasn't involved in their care. I didn't follow them up afterwards, but I can verify they were shot exclusively in the testicles.
Oh, come on.
And there were, I mean, I remember that same day, on many of the days we got young boys being brought in from the GHF sites. There was one of the GHF sites was in Al-Mawasi, and there were a lot of tents down there as well. And we saw a lot of injuries from quadcopter drones. These are remotely controlled fixed wing drones which hover. They have guns on them, they have cameras on them, and they're flown all over the place in Gaza. We saw many people shot by them. They were flown into hospitals. One of my friends was shot in the chest in the operating theatres at Nassau. Not when I was there, it was before I was there. A quadcopter was remotely controlled, presumably by someone in Tel Aviv or somewhere, flown into the hospital, shot him in the chest when he was in the operating theatre.
He's in the operating room?
He's in the operating room early in the morning, preparing the operating theatre for an imminent operation, when this quadcopter shoots him in the chest. He survived. I was with him a few weeks later than that.
Indoors.
I also saw victims, young women who had been shot whilst in their tents in Al-Mawasi, quadcopters hovering over the tents, spraying bullets indiscriminately onto the tents. So I had one woman who was 3 months pregnant, who came in with a gunshot wound and I operated on. We saved her life. The baby survived as well, but the bullet had missed her pregnant uterus by about 2 or 3 centimeters. So we saw examples like that of these quadcopters spraying bullets onto all the inhabitants of these tents.
But I mean, the quadcopters are controlled by remote, by someone who can see what they're shooting at.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of speculation that a lot of them are being driven remotely controlled using artificial intelligence.
That's not speculation.
To help the targeting. So, but absolutely, they were being controlled somehow and going into hospitals, spraying the tents in Al-Mawasi. We saw many examples of that. I saw them on my first trip in December 2023. We saw in Al-Aqsa, we had victims coming in from quadcopter.
What did you think of all of this?
I was, I was really skeptical when I was told on that first trip that these were I didn't see any quadcopter. You hear the drones the whole time. I could not believe what I was hearing. I didn't believe a lot of it early on, to be honest with you, Saka. I was naive. I assumed this was just, I wonder, it was propaganda. But I saw so much on all these trips. I saw so much clear evidence of children and women being targeted that I believe all of it.
I mean, much more than the average person. You spent your life around death and suffering and human drama. I mean, you're a cancer surgeon. So presumably you've got a higher tolerance for this than most people. I mean, obviously you do. But what effect did it have on you seeing this?
You're absolutely right. And I think working with cancer, I've had patients, die of their disease for decades. And
Of course.
I've always been a doctor who I valued intensely the relationship I have with my patients. You always have an emotional involvement. You learn to control that, but of course you get emotionally involved with your patients because you care about them deeply. So yes, I am conditioned to deal with that. And I think doctors, nurses, healthcare workers are conditioned to deal with these things. And when we're operating on these appalling situations, these children, when you have children dying under your hands on the operating table.
This is probably Tucker Carlson's best interview that I've heard personally so far. It's very touching. It's very informative to see what's actually going on in Gaza. I think you guys should really, really pay attention. Maybe watch the whole thing. This is just a clip of it. But it's very, very troubling to think that we're actually involved in this. It's disgusting of the torture that the Palestinian people are going through. They're torturing them. I mean, it's even crazy to think they have dogs that are trained with cameras and with guns attached to them, and there's somebody controlling them, and they're shooting people in hospitals, regular people. It is crazy to think that this could even be happening. And prior to the video, he was talking about going to Washington, D.C. and going to other places in the government. Nobody even, I mean, they're listening, but they're not making any efforts to go further with it. Food distribution centers, and it looks like the Hunger Games. It really does. It doesn't even look real. Like, I had to look at it again. It's like, damn, is this AI? And you see U.S. military there. You see the IDF there. And it's like they're just picking them whoever they want. Like, it's target practice. They're just having fun doing it. It is so ridiculous.